Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Let's get started and look into our first issue. The first issue is about military coup in Myanmar. We have about 4 to 5 articles. All these articles will be merged together and we will have a single focus about military coup in Myanmar. Elections to Myanmar Parliament was conducted in the month of November 2020. We have discussed this issue on 16th of November 2020. To understand what these elections are, kindly look into our 16th November CNA to get a broader picture of these elections. But what is our focus today? Our focus today would be about the military coup in Myanmar. Let's try and understand in greater detail what is this issue all about. When we look into the politics of Myanmar, there are two major political parties. One, which is led by Aung San Suu Kyi, called as National League for Democracy. The other is the military-backed Union Solidarity and Developmental Party. Both these political parties contested the elections. Elections results were out, and then what we have is the landslide victory for the National League for Democracy. So this party won nearly 390 seats and they were supposed to form the government in Myanmar. As they were to form the government, it was scheduled to meet on February 1st, 2021, which happens to be day before yesterday. But unfortunately, what we have is a military coup by the military in the country of Myanmar. Now the whole question is, why is that the military has taken over the control in Myanmar? That is because of number of reasons. What are these reasons? Let's try and understand. The 2015 elections was won by Aung San Suu Kyi. So what exactly happens? We know for the fact that she was a Peace Nobel winner. We also know for the fact she has a soft corner to the people. She has a humanitarian ground as well, and she had a personal connect with the people as well. So because she had won the 2015 elections, for the past 5 years, there was growing popularity with respect to the National League for Democracy and which was headed by Aung San Suu Kyi as well. This made the military fear her presence as well. So there was growing popularity of her. She had massive control. She had massive popularity in this particular region. This put the military in fear, apprehension, and paranoia. And as a result, they go on to say that the elections that were conducted in Myanmar were full of irregularities. What do they say currently? That elections were won, but this elections won by the National League for Democracy was with irregularities, says the military. So the military go on to say that there were certain people, few number of people who had voted more than once. They had also conducted malpractices as well. Because there were malpractices in the election, they go on to say that the election results was not right, and as a result they have imposed a year-long state of emergency in the country of Myanmar. Why are they imposing emergency? That is because they feel that the election results were not according to the mandate because of irregularities. This is where they approach the United Elections Commission of Myanmar. This is one of the election commissions in the country of Myanmar. They request this particular election commission to find out if there are any malpractices. The United Elections Commission does not agree with the military. They in fact asked the previous government of Aung San Suu Kyi to also present the same in the parliament as well. When the election commission of Myanmar rejects this particular proposal and the government does not believe in projecting to this particular idea of malpractices, that is when we have this year-long emergency which was enforced by the military, and that is where we have the military coup in Myanmar. Now what we have to focus is on the actual reasons. We have heard what the military has to say, why there is a military coup, why there is a state of emergency, but now we have to focus on what the actual reasons are. When you go back to the elections, as we discussed, it was a landslide victory for the National League for Democracy, and this was also mean that this is a decimated elections for the military pact Union Solidarity and the Developmental Party, since the military party, which had a firm backing from the military, were able to win only 33 seats in the parliamentary elections. They were decimated in the parliamentary elections of Myanmar. So on one side, you have the popularity of the National League for Democracy, which is increasing. On the other side, there is depreciation or loss of voting, loss of people's support for the Union Solidarity and Developmental Party. So what does the military feel? Because there is popularity, it felt that all the powers that was consolidated by the military in the last 1 decade or so will ultimately go in vain, and now what we will have is a people's government which will ultimately remove all the powers that which were given to the military in the constitution of Myanmar. So the whole idea being that they were scared, and this is why they have gone ahead with this particular coup. And at the same time, we also have to remember for the fact the General Min Aung Hlaing, his term was to conclude in the year 2021. His term was to conclude, and as a result, he wanted more power when it comes to the regulations in Myanmar. As a result, he has enforced this particular coup. That is because he wanted to expand the power when it comes to Myanmar. This is what is the actual reasons with respect to the military coup when it comes to Myanmar. Is this the first time that it is happening? No. There have been similar instances in Myanmar as well. Let's go back to the year 1962. 1962, once again, the government had a fight with the military as well. Back then, we had Prime Minister U Nu who had won as well, but he was overthrown by the military. Next, in the year 1990, again, similar issue had surfaced as well. The government had a direct clash with the military, and what we see is similar instances of military coup. So this is not one such example which is something unique, but what we have is the previous establishment or previous presidents, where in 1962 and in 1990 there were military coups by the military with respect to the government. Now what we have to focus is on whether the military has the power to enforce the emergency, or do they have any legal or the constitutional backing to impose this emergency, or who will actually question the election mandate. The primary focus of the military was it questioned that the elections that was conducted had a lot of irregularities. So who should be in a position, which constitutional authority should question it? Yes, the military has a right. Yes, its political party has the right to question the elections, but does it have the power to impose the emergency or question against this particular mandate? That is what we have to look at with respect to the legal and the constitutional mandate. Whenever there is an issue with respect to the elections, it has to be dealt by the relevant authority. Who is the relevant authority? It has to be the United Elections Commission of Myanmar. But in this particular case, they have clearly gone on to say that there has been no malpractice, but in spite of it persisting and continuing with the view, what we have is this particular view developed by the military. Apart from it, we have Article 417 of the Constitution of Myanmar, which empowers the president to proclaim emergency in consultation with the National Defense and Security Council. So whenever there has to be an emergency that has to be imposed, the president has to consult the National Defense and the Security Council. In the present scenario, have they consulted? No. The Security Council was not consulted. In fact, the president is also under house arrest as well. So how can the Myanmar military impose the emergency is the next point that we have to focus. So primarily, all these legal mandates, constitutional mandates have been violated, which clearly goes on to say that this was not according to the mandate of legal principles or the constitutional values, but instead it is the coup of the military of Myanmar is what we have to understand. Now let's trace back our journey to some historical facts and precedents. What is that we have to understand? Back in the year 2008, Myanmar came up with what is called as the draft constitution. This draft constitution was created, it was supposed to be implemented by the military of Myanmar. The question now arises, why did Myanmar military back then wanted to introduce what is called as democracy? Until 2008 and much prior to that as well, from 1990, the major control was under the military power. But why did they want to come up with a constitution and move a transition to democracy is what we have to look at. That is where we see that there was constant pressure from United States of America and also from the Western powers as well. So because there were Western powers which was asking Myanmar to come up with this particular policy and a new constitution, they drafted a constitution in the year 2008. Apart from this, there was also economic concern as well. Economics was not that great when it comes to Myanmar. Why? Because they were a closed economy, since they were completely controlled by the Myanmar military, and at the same time they were not open to other countries. Their economics was suffering a major loss. The economy in the country were not doing that really well, and as a result, that is why, because the Western powers and United States of America told that sanctions would be imposed on Myanmar in order to make sure that they do not bleed through the economy. That is why they came up with the 2008 constitution. But when it comes to the actual elections, which was supposed to be conducted in 2010, we have the National League for Democracy, which boycotted the 2010 elections. Why? Because this political party felt that this was just a puppet government that will be installed in place of a military control. So what they felt, even if there is democracy, even if people are elected, it will be controlled indirectly by the military. That is why the Aung San Suu Kyi led National League for Democracy did not contest in the year 2010. Since it did not contest for the next 5 years, the army had to loosen its grip on the government and society. Why? Because there was constant pressure from United States of America, there was constant pressure from the Western countries, and as a result, this particular mandate of the military started loosening over a period of time. All these people, that is Aung San Suu Kyi and their party men who were house arrested, and they were prisoners as well, they were immediately released. Media censorship that was present in Myanmar was also reduced as well. And then what we had is this political party, that is the National League for Democracy, also wanted to contest the elections as well. Why? Because the media freedom was completely open. She was able to convince the people. So in the year 2015, what we have is this political party which was able to contest the elections, and in 2015 they contested the elections and she won and became the prime minister. But do remember, she did won the elections as well, but she could not have brought any drastic changes with respect to the constitution. That is because military had introduced one of the amendments in the constitution. According to the provisions that were introduced by the military in the constitution of Myanmar, about 25% of the seats in both the houses of the parliament were to be reserved only for the military officials. In fact, number of key portfolios, let's say for example the internal security, the defense, were completely under the control of the military. Now linking this historical picture to the present scenario, we can say that the Myanmar polity is greatly divided. How? There are two segments of the political elite, one which is led by the military, the other is with the help of the democracy led by the National League for Democracy. Because these two powers are in conflicting viewpoints, that is why there is a coup in the present scenario. And when we speak about military, military has enough economic demands as well, and they have invested in number of projects. They have a huge sway when it comes to the Myanmar polity and politics. In case they do lose control and another political party steps in, it means that all the economic dividends that they have captured for a long period of time will ultimately be lost. That is why they don't want to lose the control in Myanmar. And at the same time, as we initially discussed, General Min Aung Hlaing's career may also come to an end, which he does not want. So taking up the idea of coup will ultimately mean that NLD can be controlled by the military. What has been the response at the internal level and what has been the response at the international level is what we have to focus. When it comes to the internal politics, we have the National League for Democracy, which happens to be a major party in Myanmar, has gone on to say that Aung San Suu Kyi will have to be immediately released, and this capture of power by the military will have to be taken out, and the military has to recognize that this particular election mandate is true to its order and people are supporting the National League for Democracy. This is on the internal front. But now when we look into the external front, that is on the international arena, we have United States of America, which has gone on to say that this is not going to be acceptable according to the United Nations standards. Then we have the European Union, we have the United Kingdom, and about 15 countries which have issued a joint statement opposing any attempt to overcome this particular elections or impede Myanmar's democratic transition. So they have opposed the military coup in Myanmar. Now what we have to focus is in reference to India. When it comes to India, we have the Ministry of External Affairs which has gone on to say, and I quote, "We have noted the developments in Myanmar with deep concern. India has always been steadfast in its support to the process of democratic transition in Myanmar. We believe that the rule of law and democratic process must be upheld. We are monitoring the situation closely," says the Indian government with respect to this coup. But what we also have to remember, India always believes in the policy of non-interference. What is this policy of non-interference? We are not China. China goes up to Nepal, it speaks about the Maoist political parties divide and they interfere in the direct politics of the country. India is not China. India believes that in case there are any issues within that particular country, it is for them to sort out. What India believes is not entering into the internal dynamics of Myanmar. And at the same time, India also need not have to worry as well. Why? That is because, as we know, there is military control right now, and we have another party that is NLD that is present in Myanmar. With both these parties, India has a close connection, and India need not have to worry. And in case there are any eventualities in the near future, Indian diplomacy, Indian government would be able to manage, is what we have to understand with respect to all these articles. But another angle to it is in reference to China. Now the question is, has China played its card, or has China made some introductions with respect to this military coup in Myanmar, is what we have to understand. When you look into the position of China, China has not criticized this military coup. Instead, it has gone on to say that it does not want international community to interfere in the affairs of Myanmar. Unfortunately, what China does is it in fact interferes in every country, but it does not want other countries to interfere. While there are countries which are looking at democratic transition, China does not want the democratic transition because it does not have democracy, because it believes in autocracy, which is what is being promoted by China indirectly, says this article. So what does this article speak about? It speaks about China supporting the military junta in Myanmar, that which is taken the route of military coup in Myanmar. We have to understand for the fact, when it comes to Myanmar, China is losing control when it comes to Myanmar. That is because of the democratic policies that which has been initiated in Myanmar. On one side, the growth factor of China is decreasing. On the other side, it is not able to make economic advantages, and at the same time, what we also see is the military backing in Myanmar is also losing its control. If the military control in Myanmar loses, it means more power will be out of China, and as a result, they are indirectly supporting the military coup, is what we have to understand. Apart from this, in case there is United States of America, if it imposes sanctions on Myanmar, this will require the support of a country, and one of the countries which has a permanent membership in United Nations Security Council happens to be China. Even prior to 2011 as well, China had maintained close relationship with Myanmar military leadership and has often backed the country from the threat of sanctions as a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. As we can remember, Mao Zedong once said that power flows from the barrel of the gun. The same policies have been supported by China. The same has been utilized by military in the present scenario in Myanmar, and that is why we have the military coup in Myanmar is what we have to understand in reference to all these articles. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about Maoism in India and how countermeasures have to be taken in order to bring an end to this particular Maoism ideology. What is the context? We have the assistant commander of Cobra unit, which happens to be Nikhil P. Balerao, who died recently because of the improvised explosive device that had a blast in November 2020. This IED went off while all these Cobra units were conducting an anti-Maoist operations, and this IED explosion led to the death of the commandant, and this also injured about 8 people as well. So what this particular issue points out is that there is the intelligence failure and we have to enhance on our intelligence. Now the first question is, what is this Cobra? Cobra basically stands for the Commando Battalion for Resolute Action. This was raised by the Central Police Reserve Force. They were specially trained in the guerrilla warfare, and this happens to be one of the anti-Naxal operation units which are also combating insurgents in the northeast region. Before we understand what this article speaks about, the counter issues that we have to bring about, we have to understand how the Maoism or the Maoists operate in a particular region. There are about 5 phases how they operate. The first stage is what is called as the survey stage. What is this survey stage? Let's say for example there is a particular area. This area is in a remote corner of the country. They do not have access to the water, they do not have access to the education, they do not have access to the health, and there might be certain issues in this particular region where the government previously or its authorities might not have paid heed to their concerns. So looking at all these concerns, what they do is they conduct a survey. So the Maoists and its groups who have an ideology identify which that area is. So the first thing is to identify that there is a specific area and this specific area is suffering from a sense of deprivation, and only when there is a sense of deprivation they would be able to add on, inflict and come about bringing a change in their ideology. That is why the first stage is called as the survey stage. So these people go to a particular area and see if there is deprivation in that particular area. The second stage is what is called as the struggle stage. What is the struggle stage? In the first stage they would have identified that there are people, the government is not able to meet up to their demands. So in the second phase they actually go and sympathize with their cause. They put torch into these people that government is not doing anything for them, that the government is against the people's growth, it does not want to empower the people. So they effectively put in their propaganda, indoctrinate the people and campaign to project that the government does not work for them and there is an administrative failure in that particular region. So the second phase is what is called as the struggle phase, where they indoctrinate and they also make sure that their propaganda and agenda lead to the local sympathizers. The third is what is called as the resistance stage. What is this resistance stage? Basically this is where they also offer protests. What are these protests for? Let's say for example, ideally the government should have done a particular program or implemented a particular scheme, but what do? They indoctrinate the people in such a way that these propaganda works for them and the people go against the government. The government ideally would have wanted to do something good for that particular region, but this indoctrination makes sure that there is protest in that particular region. And after the resistance stage, where people are completely indoctrinated, they have become the sympathizers of the Maoism ideology. This is where they enter the fourth phase called as the guerrilla stage. So what is this guerrilla stage? In the third stage it was only about opposing the government, but in the fourth stage they take arms against the government. This is where they hide in the forest area, they work on this improvised explosive devices, and ultimately they take on the might of the government, which is what is called as the guerrilla stage. And finally they come up with what is called as the liberated stage. So this liberated stage means that they would have captured that particular region completely, and that region will be completely under the control of the Maoism. This is how they usually make sure that a particular region, a particular area is captured when it comes to that particular area. Now what we have to focus, because there is this Maoism spread that is happening in the state of Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Bihar and Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, the government was to make sure that this is completely rooted out. So what does the government do? The government, in order to boost this particular anti-insurgency and the anti-Maoism strategy, increases the number of people who are operating in this region. So we have the CRPF, and once the Kashmir issue was slowly dying out, what we also had, that CRPF people who were working in the Kashmir region were also pulled towards Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand and Bihar as well. And at the same time, the border security force and the ITBP were also put up in this particular places as well, and they were given training about 12 weeks for induction training in Chhattisgarh. So the CRPF who were operating in Kashmir were slowly brought into this particular place. Training was given to them so that we from the Indian government side can ultimately bring an end to the Maoism. So what we have is the initiatives taken by the government. But in spite of all these offensive tactics, in spite of the control of this particular Maoism strategy, what we see is periodic death of our dear soldiermen. This is the pathetic state of affairs. This is how the Maoism works. In order to overcome this particular issue, what we have to make sure is take number of steps when it comes to the ending the ideology of Maoism. So what do we have to do? This is where we have to set up intelligence in a particular area. As of now, we do have the intelligence as well. We would be able to get enough information as well. The same has been transmitted to the CRPF and the police personnel. But in spite of the intelligence that we have, there is a necessity to increase the technical intelligence and also set up more intelligence and our own men who are acting as spies in that particular region. So the intelligence setup in the left-wing affected states will have to be boosted. We also require extensive use of the Belgium Malinois dogs. That is because they would be able to identify the improvised explosive devices. Drones will also have to be employed as well. Why? Because if we are going there physically, we may not be able to see what are the activities of the Maoist. So we have to effectively make use of the drones, see what their activities are and take them by surprise and ultimately eliminate them, neutralize them so that they are not threat to the country. We also have to make sure that all the soldiers, that is these CRPF men, stay in the Pakka buildings and not in the tents. Why? That is because these people might be employed in the border areas or they might come from some other areas as well. So if it is in tents, there is a possibility that they might be attacked and we may also lose our dear soldiers as well. In order to overcome this, and apart from this, there are also health related vagaries as well. Weather vagaries are also present in that particular area, and there can also be a possibility of disease spread as well because they live in a forest area. In order to make sure that we prevent the health related issue, weather related issue, and also to make sure that they are not targeted by the Maoists, they have to stay in the Pakka buildings. As of now, funds have been given to this particular area, but when we look into the statistics, the amount that was sanctioned for this particular project was nearly 114 crores for the construction of the accommodation. But what was allotted? The allotment of the money was only 33 crores. This means that the government is not providing enough funding for the accommodation and for the operations when it comes to this region. So going forward, all these issues will have to be addressed so that we can bring an end to the ideology of Maoism, is what this article all about. Eventually, if this particular idea works out, the CRPF will have to take control of this particular area for about a decade or so. They have to completely neutralize the Maoist ideology, and apart from that, we also have to take up the developmental projects as well. So it is not only about the offensive strategy, what we require is the developmental strategy as well. People, if they are having a dearth of the developmental project, that is why they might take up arms. It is not necessarily that they'll take up arms, but because they are indoctrinated, they might or they may take up the arms. So what we also require is the developmental progress in this particular region. Added to this, we have to make sure that we understand the cultural, the political, and the economic backing of the Maoism and hit them at the very grassroots level. So we have to hit them at the struggling stage and the service stage, and we have to make sure that all the local sympathizers with the Maoists will have to be captured and they have to be changed as well. Indian democracy is a beautiful one. We take up every single person into picture. We are an inclusive developmental model. So if we are able to change the indoctrinated words, the statements, and the ideology, we can take them as part of our developmental process. So, what we have to make sure is that CRPF should continue working on the offensive strategy, and after few years, this power has to be transferred to the local police or to the local security agencies. These security agencies can be greyhounds as we see in Andhra Pradesh, or it can be transferred to the Jharkhand Jaguars who can prevent the Maoist elements from raising their heads. Apart from the offensive strategy, we have to make sure that rehabilitation policies, developmental policies are also taken parallelly in order to bring an end to the Maoist policy is what this article all about. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says it's goodbye to fiscal orthodoxy. The article here is focusing on what is called as the Washington Consensus and how India has a mixed reaction with respect to the Washington Consensus as well as its applicability. What we have to initially understand is the idea of Washington Consensus. What is this concept all about? Basically, this is about free market economic policies. This is supported by the World Bank, it is supported by the IMF, and it is also supported by United States Treasury as well. What are the basic and some of the important principles of this Washington Consensus? It usually discourages developing economics from having high fiscal deficits relative to their GDP. So it does not entertain that a particular country has high fiscal deficits. In case they have high fiscal deficits, World Bank or IMF does not entertain giving loans to this particular country. The next it makes use of is the foreign direct investment. It promotes the foreign direct investments, and at the same time it also wants that trade barriers are completely removed when it comes to that particular country. It does not believe in closed economy, but instead it wants the open economy where foreign companies would also be able to invest in another country. That is what is another principle of the Washington Consensus. The third is about privatization. So what this particular Washington Consensus believes is that government has no role to do business when it comes to the business. So wherever there has to be regulation, that is where the government has to enter. But when it comes to the business, it is the private organizations which has to conduct all the other areas where the government is present. It has to completely remove itself, and most of the sectors will have to be privatized is another objective of the Washington Consensus. Why is this important for us? That is because the author draws a parallel to the recent budget 2021. The author goes on to say that all these important aspects as present in the Washington Consensus, India is able to meet it in certain parameters, but at the same time it has also moved away from this Washington Consensus in certain other parameters. What are the parameters that it is able to meet? What are the parameters it is not meeting is what we have to understand. The first important parameter is with respect to the fiscal deficit. What is it about fiscal deficit? We have Nirmala Sitharamanji who had presented the budget on February 1st, 2021. She has gone on to say that the fiscal deficit would be about 9.5% of the GDP for the financial year 21 and 6.8% in the financial year 2022. When we look into the fiscal responsibility and budget management, it had a clear-cut idea that fiscal deficit cannot be beyond 3.5%. But what we currently see is that the fiscal deficit, as said by the finance minister, will be somewhere around 9.5% of the GDP for the year 2021 and 6.8% for the year 2022, which means the fiscal deficit is comparatively higher, which means the first principle of Washington consensus is violated, says the author. On one side, India is violating some of the core principles of Washington consensus, but at the other side, it is also making sure that it is supporting the very idea of the foreign direct investments as well as the privatization as well. How? Yesterday, when we did discuss about the insurance sector, we said that it will be increased from 49% to about 74%, which means India is supporting the very idea of more foreign direct investments into India. And at the same time, we did discuss yesterday in our budget session that when it comes to privatization, there will be public sector banks, which we don't know, two in number, which will be privatized. And we also discussed, apart from the strategic sectors, all the non-strategic sectors will either be merged or it will be eventually privatized as well. So what it means is that the government is supporting two fundamental ideas of Washington consensus, but it is also violating what is called as the core principle of fiscal deficit. Apart from this, it is also increasing the duties on some of the imports, which is against the Washington consensus. It is also providing performance linked incentives for the designated sectors, which is again against the Washington consensus. So what we see is a mixed bag when it comes to the budget 2021 is what this article all about. So what we see is a constant departure from the government on few ends, and at the same time it has gone in line with the Washington consensus on the other side. But what we have to remember is that when it comes to the fiscal deficit in the present scenario, because of COVID-19, we also have the World Bank and IMF who are supporting this very idea of government spending as well. Why? That is because only when we have the fiscal stimulus, only when the government spends, is when the economy will get back to its original position, says the International Monetary Fund as well as the World Bank. Let's go back to the year 1929. We saw the greatest depression in United States of America. After this, what we actually witness is the government also started spending when it comes to the United States of America. Or let's go back to the year 2008. We had the financial crisis in United States of America. It hit not only United States of America, but it had hit most of the Western countries as well. But some countries like China and India were not impacted. Why? Because we had what is called as the governmental control as well. Government was able to provide stimulus into the market. So taking these examples, it is completely right that we have more fiscal stimulus in the present scenario. Apart from this, we also have to understand for the fact the author goes on to voice certain concerns with respect to this particular issue. In case the government pumps in a lot of money, it provides fiscal stimulus, it also has to make sure that there is no rise to inflation as well. More the money in the market, this will also mean it can give rise to inflation. And at the same time, the government has not spoken about the Reserve Bank of India benchmark target as well. When it comes to the inflation, we have a target of 2 to 6%, but this has not been changed by the government. Why? Because what we have is plus or minus 4, and we have a trajectory of minus 2% and plus 2%. That is not changed by the government with respect to the RBI. So what we have to monitor is with respect to the inflation is the first major concern as voiced by the author. Apart from this, the tax to GDP ratio or the revenue collection for the government of India has been going low as well. In fact, the government believes that the revenue that it can generate is via the disinvestment, because we are not able to generate the revenue. One is because the corporate tax rates are low, two is because of the GST, and three is because of COVID-19. So what is the government looking at? The government is looking at disinvestment. All the government public sector units will be ultimately privatized. It will be sold to a private company, which means the government would be able to collect the money where they will be able to manage the tax to GDP ratio is what is an idea of the government. But this idea of disinvestment might not be good in the long run, says the author of this article. Why? That is because the author goes on to say that in case the government does decide on a neutral basis that this particular public sector bank or one of the organizations or the industry will have to be sold to the private entrepreneur or to a private company, but there can be allegations that this particular company is done on the crony capitalism principles or on the principle of favoritism and it might not be on the presence of merit is the first criticism that the government may get, says the author. Apart from this, privatization of banks might also result in what is called as financial stability issue. Why? Because more the banks that are privatized, which is why we will also have the financial stability. Back in 1970s and much prior to that as well, there were large number of private banks. Why were they actually nationalized? That is because of the very same reason. And at the same time, when they are privatized, this can also result in job losses, and when there are job losses, this can also hit back the government and evoke a backlash from the people who have lost their jobs. So the government should be very careful about the disinvestment policy, says the author in this particular case. And apart from that, he questions the whole idea of privatization and the foreign direct investments as well. Why? The government has a policy of Atmanirbhar Bharat, which means the government is saying that we can be self-reliant, which means it is the domestic industries which has to grow, and the people, the citizens of India, who have to invest in the markets of India. But when we have privatization, or when we are letting the foreign FDI units come and invest in India, which means the whole idea of Atmanirbhar Bharat, which is self-reliant India, which has to be based on homegrown industries, homegrown people investing in India, this very idea will be nullified, says the author in this particular case. So if the nation's political economy have to overcome all these issues, we have to make sure that there is a proper strategy by the government, both in terms of the fiscal and also in terms of the stimulus, says the author with respect to this article. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is important from the preliminary examination point of view. It speaks about the Lingaraja temple in Odisha. Kindly remember, the Lingaraja temple is in the state of Odisha. It is a Hindu temple dedicated to Lord Shiva, and it is one of the oldest temples in Bhubaneswar, which is present in the state of Odisha. It was built by King Jagati Keshari of Somavansh. The main tower of this temple measures 180 feet in height. So kindly remember, the temple was built by the kings of the Somavanshi dynasty with the later additions that were made by the Ganga rulers. The temple marks the culmination of the temple architecture in Bhubaneswar, which was the cradle of the Kalinga school of temple architecture. So we have what is called as the Kalinga school of temple architecture, which was used for the construction of the Lingaraja temple. So this is built in red stone. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into some of the mains practice questions. Why did the Myanmar military stage a coup? Will it have any impact on India's relationship with Myanmar? Critically examine. Next question. Despite the offensive strategies initiated by Union government and the state governments in India to root out Maoism, why does CRPF continue to suffer heavy losses in Naxal attacks? What measures have to be taken to ensure better response from security forces in future while operating against Maoists? So please write all your answers on the comment section. Peer review, come up with the positive feedback to the answers. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.